bit of time to sort out, the other one. I'm sorry about that. So let's take, the AU protocol, which will be presented by Gabi. I think he needs some encouragement to ascend the stage, please. If you want to stand here, or if you want to stand. Okay, thank you so much. Over to you.
Okay. Good morning. Are you awake, alive, enthusiastic, alert? With some more of that. Expectant. Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, just to say again a warm welcome and to say thank you very much for this opportunity. This should have been presented by the AU. Unfortunately, they were not able to come. So I'm presenting it not on their behalf, but basically looking at the protocol as it is, the protocol. Sorry. So you can have a gist of what the protocol is about. First of all, just to say, yesterday, what came out very clearly was that COVID represented a watershed for social protection, where we saw over 34 African countries implementing social protection programs. And that momentum continued. And so in February of 2022, the African heads of state unanimously adopted a protocol on social protection, which is entitled, in fact, it is linked to another instrument, so that is why it's so long. It's entitled Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of citizens, and that's key, the rights of citizens to social protection and social security. So, what's the importance of this protocol? Why? So, it has three important reasons why it is so essential. The first, and we heard that yesterday over and over, it reaffirms the rights for everyone to social protection. Secondly, it builds on existing international standards and agreement, the African Charter on People's Rights, and other declarations like the Social Policy Protocol. Affirms the social protection must be a part of efforts to mitigate climate change and build resilience, a theme that we saw yesterday again. Hence its relevance. So the structure of the protocol, first you have an introductory and foundation provision section, and these are done under different articles. You have key categories of groups of persons affected by social protection and social security for which the protocol is asking heads of state to respond to. There's the traditional social security contingency affecting vulnerable categories of persons, the recognition of what we call informal social protection, but it's actually more traditional social safety nets. Okay? But also it has broader areas of social welfare and social protection. There's another category and grouping of articles under operationalization, financing, implementation, popularization. Important to make sure that the protocol is widely known, disseminated, widely known, and adjudication framework. How, in a case of dispute, the protocol will actually resolve that dispute. And lastly, concluding provisions, formal arrangements pertaining to the AU protocol itself. So you have Article 2 and 3 that provides the guiding principle for social protection and state obligations. And in that, it sets out fundamental principles and obligations of member states, what is expected of them. Secondly, in Article 3, the right to social protection. And here what is critical is that citizen is at the center of it all. So it affirms the fact that social protection is a right, and we heard that yesterday. And as a right, what it means is that the state has a fundamental responsibility to fulfill that right, as the citizen has also a commensurate obligation to be able to claim that right. So they are the duty bearers. And it underlines that the state has an obligation to ensure that social protection is accessible, available, adequate, affordable, and key, transparent. So you have also part of the protocol what we call binding commitments for the states. And these are in 4 categories. One is that states should develop appropriate regulation and policies at national level. And that includes legislation. It should allocate public resources to social protection. This is a lot about financing. The professor talked about that, okay? Towards the goal of ensuring universal social protection. Thirdly, it talks about the state should provide a minimum package of essential social protection, which should at least cover the basic needs of all its citizens. And lastly, it talks about inclusive governance, and this is the tripartite social dialogue for the development implementation. As you can see, seeping in a bit of the ILO. When we talk about the tripartite, it's always the government, labor, and the workers. The protocol also has a strong emphasis on inclusive and non-discriminatory national social frameworks, and looks at, and so women under Article 8 and 13, where it calls for review and abolition of all existing discriminatory laws, customs, we heard that yesterday, okay, and practices that hinder social protection for all, including for women. So again, a very strong gender component, critical. Likewise, children and youth and elderly. Now, if you see, this follows very much the line of the minimum guarantees that define under social protection. Women, children, youth, and the elderly. It looks at more particular vulnerable groups that tend to always be excluded, the person with disability, and interesting enough, and a huge area for many African countries, the whole subject of informality, the informal. And so there, in Article 5, informal and rural workers, under that category, it calls for adoption of a regulatory framework that includes informal and rural workers in social security schemes, whilst supporting formalization efforts. An objective that has been around for quite some time. How do you formalize the informal? And how do you give them the incentive to become formal? Because basically in many African countries, there's not that incentive. People make very minimum income, unpredictable, and that's unpredictable income, they're always afraid to use that to pay tax. So it has acted as a disincentive. But it's now a implicit obligation on the state to create that enabling environment for that formalization. When it becomes informal, it goes to formalization. Now it's not working anymore. Okay, great. So another, building on looking at the various categories along the so-called the life cycle, you also have a sharp focus on maternity and paternity protection, which again is another key element of social protection to ensure and covers the risk. If we look at the life risk, it covers that component of the newborn. So it calls for paid maternity leave. It calls for protection against pregnancy-related discrimination. It reaffirms that fathers also have to have a role to play in supporting the mother and encourages paternity leave. So what do they require? What does the protocol require the states to do within that regard? So there's health insurance, that to establish health insurance scheme that covers all the sectors as a minimum. Then we talk about portability of benefits. What does that mean, basically? It means that, because in Africa you have a lot of migrant population. So it means that if you leave South Africa and you go to Zimbabwe, you can still access social protection. And states are supposed to. And a very good example, actually, was the very first day when the minister was talking about what they were doing, providing social protection to refugees. Okay. So that's another good example. But now it makes it an obligation of those states that sign and ratify this protocol to fulfill that right. And then the complementary laws. So signing and ratifying the protocol. So when a country intends to ratify the protocol, it should declare to the chairperson, of course, of the African Commission. Entry into force will only occur after 15 countries have ratified. As of today, only 2 countries have signed the protocol so far, Niger and Cabo Verde. However, I have very good news for you today. You remember you said excited, expectant? Huh? Are you expecting? Okay, good. Well, I'm happy to inform you that Zimbabwe will be the first country to not only sign, who have signed, but to be the first country to ratify the protocol. But that's not over. We are privileged to have amongst us one of the key persons driving that, and that was the chairperson of the African Platform of Social Protection, and she's here with us. Priscilla, Gabby, can you stand? So on that note, thank you.
Thank you so much. I know you might have questions, but remember he was presenting, but maybe we find some time, on the program, to ask, questions for clarity. Like we said, that I'm parachuting, a presentation here on the experience of FAO Central Africa, linking nutrition and social protection. And I think the reason why we are bringing these, especially here, is because yesterday there were a lot of, issues around, nutrition and how do we link and all that. Then as the organizing committee, we felt that it will be important that, we bring, this presentation, and she has very short, time to go through that. Thank you. So, and I'm duting you on that. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aissa Mamadou Taibu. I'm the nutrition officer for Central Africa. So allow me, please, to do the presentation in French. And then, c'est ça? Okay. So, oh. C'est comment? So if I want to go back, I use this one. the top one. OK. D'accord. Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour. Bon, je ne vais pas trop m'attarder sur ça parce que hier, il y a eu... Je peux continuer? OK. Je ne vais pas trop m'attarder sur ça parce qu'il y a eu hier des présentations sur les données. Mais je voulais juste pointer ce qui est ici, le surpoids au niveau du monde, où nous avons 37 millions de personnes aujourd'hui qui sont en surpoids. C'est parce que nous avons constaté que hier, quand on parle de problèmes de protection sociale, c'est comme si ça ne touche que ceux qui sont en situation de malnutrition. Or, aujourd'hui, quand nous regardons la situation, l'obésité, le surpoids deviennent un problème réel et qui impacte beaucoup de populations. Donc, c'est un peu pour montrer que nous faisons de la protection sociale dans l'humanitaire, mais n'oublions pas non plus qu'il est important de le faire dans le développement. Je pense qu'il y a une personne hier qui l'a souligné, parce que nous avons aujourd'hui beaucoup d'enfants en milieu scolaire qui se retrouvent à moins de 5 ans et qui ont un poids d'un adulte. Donc, imaginez dans quelques années ce que ça va devenir, et donc nous devons agir là-dessus. Alors, je voudrais rappeler par rapport à la question donc, de la faim et de la malnutrition, une théorie de José de Castro. José de Castro, c'est un Brésilien, médecin, géographe, africain, et qui a été l'un des premiers, comment on appelle ça, conseillers de la FAO en son temps. Donc, c'est ce que nous avons mentionné ici, et qui a aussi fondé l'Institut de nutrition de l'Université fédérale de Janeiro. C'est aussi un homme politique, comme je disais, qui a été élu en 1952, président du conseil exécutif de la FAO, et qui a reçu donc des prix même de sciences politiques des États-Unis, et il a aussi reçu le Conseil mondial de la paix qui lui a décerné le prix international. Alors, la théorie de José de Castro, depuis ce temps-là, il a déjà dit que les questions de la faim ne sont pas un phénomène isolé, mais c'est un phénomène interdisciplinaire qui concerne tous les secteurs. Aujourd'hui, quand nous voyons, heureusement d'ailleurs maintenant, on commence à se réveiller pour intégrer tous les secteurs, mais pendant longtemps, on a considéré que c'est une question médicale. Quand on parle de nutrition dans nos pays, on pense que c'est uniquement le secteur de la santé qui doit s'en occuper. Or, lui, depuis son temps, il a considéré que c'était un phénomène interdisciplinaire. Il a toujours désapprouvé que c'est un phénomène qui est incurable, donc on ne peut pas traiter ça alors qu'on peut le prévenir. Et il a également considéré que c'est un ensemble complexe d'événements qui peuvent être simultanément soit biologiques, soit socio-économiques et autres, comme nous le voyons ici. Et évidemment, il a souligné les questions des inégalités depuis son temps, les habitudes alimentaires qui impactent les facteurs socio-sanitaires, et la faim, elle n'est pas seulement que, comment dirais-je, que visible, elle est aussi invisible. Nous pouvons avoir des personnes devant nous, des enfants devant nous qui ont l'air bien portants, bien nourris, mais en réalité, ils souffrent de ce que nous appelons la faim cachée ou la faim insoupçonnée, parce que cette personne ou cette femme ou cet enfant souffre de carences en vitamine A, souffre de carences en fer, souffre de carences en iode, qui ont des conséquences parfois irréversibles. Donc, ne voyons pas seulement la résolution de la question de la faim, mais lions aussi aux questions de qualité que nous trouvons dans une alimentation beaucoup plus diversifiée. Alors, je voudrais aussi rappeler ici que la nutrition, même si on l'ignore, c'est un investissement, comme on dit, intelligent, parce que vous investissez $1 dans les questions de nutrition, ça vous rapporte $16. Et sur le plan économique, ça peut améliorer donc le PIB, augmenter le PIB de 2 à 3%. Et cela a été démontré parce qu'en 2012, il y a eu une réunion donc des économistes, et parmi lesquels il y avait un prix Nobel même de l'économie, qui a souligné qu'un des investissements les plus irrésistibles est de fournir une alimentation en quantité, mais surtout en qualité, pour qu'on puisse augmenter nos ressources. Pourquoi on les dit? Parce que quand on se retrouve avec des gens qui sont affamés, on le voit tous, ça impacte l'économie, ils n'ont pas les capacités de travailler, les enfants n'ont pas les capacités d'apprentissage au niveau des écoles, donc forcément, ça a un impact. Et qu'est-ce qui s'est... on a rappelé ça. Maintenant, dans tout ça là, je pense que le monde est en train de prendre conscience de cette situation, et il y a eu beaucoup d'engagements que je juste noter quelques-uns ici, dans les audits, et quand vous regardez, la nutrition est au centre. Tous les 17 ODD ont un lien d'une façon ou d'une autre avec la nutrition. Nous avons la conférence internationale, la deuxième conférence internationale sur la nutrition organisée en 2014 par la FAO et qui a fait ressortir 60 recommandations. Évidemment, tous les pays ne vont pas mettre en place les 60 recommandations, mais chaque pays va se retrouver dans ces recommandations et éventuellement essayer d'agir. Nous avons les questions de défi fin zéro. Souvent, et quand on parle de défi fin zéro, tout le monde pense que c'est uniquement pour réduire la faim. Mais quand vous regardez les indicateurs de défi fin zéro, vous vous retrouvez avec le retard de croissance chez les enfants de moins de 5 ans sur lequel nous, les partenaires, devons agir. Mais souvent, on pense qu'on assure seulement la sécurité alimentaire et le problème est résolu. Nous devons réduire les questions de gaspillage. Nous devons nous assurer évidemment de la réduction ou de l'amélioration du revenu de certaines personnes. Et nous avons les déclarations de Maputo, ça tout le monde le sait, mais nous avons aussi le premier sommet de parlementaires contre la faim et la malnutrition qui s'est tenu à Madrid en 2018 pour amener les parlementaires à s'intéresser aux questions de la faim et de la nutrition. Alors, donc, c'est juste une entrée en matière. Qu'est-ce que nous avons fait au niveau du bureau sous-régional pour l'Afrique centrale? Nous avons quelques expériences, parmi lesquelles je vais montrer juste 2. C'est un projet que nous avons mis en place au niveau de 3 pays, notamment le Congo, le Gabon et le Cameroun, où nous avons expérimenté ce que nous avons appelé des classes vertes pour une production innovante, ludique, son côté amusant pour les enfants, éducative, parce qu'on leur apprend, et nutritive, parce qu'on produit des aliments qui sont riches en micronutriments. Et nous avons, dans cette expérience, donc c'est de faire une production en utilisant des techniques innovantes en milieu scolaire, en utilisant du matériel qui est recyclable et en nous assurant de la préservation de l'environnement. Donc quand vous verrez ici, quand vous voyez ici, c'est au niveau des écoles, on a utilisé des pneus, on a utilisé des bidons, on a utilisé pas mal de choses pour que ces élèves puissent les utiliser, soit dans les cours ou même au niveau de la maison. C'est pour cela que vous verrez qu'on a voulu impliquer la communauté, puisque nous savons que les enfants, il y a des périodes de vacances, et nous avons voulu que ce soit des choses qui soient pérennes, parce que nous savons que l'enfant a aussi une influence aussi sur le parent. Quand l'enfant sait ce qu'il y a, même si le parent ne veut pas, n'est pas convaincu, il peut facilement être influencé par l'enfant. Donc, dans cette expérience, et hier, je pense que quelqu'un l'a dit, il y a beaucoup de choses que nous devons faire, mais souvent, le côté formation, à mon avis, il reste un peu le parent pauvre. On initie une nouvelle idée, une initiative, et on pense que tout le monde peut comprendre ça facilement. Je pense qu'il est important que nous intégrons forcément les questions de formation. Nous, on se retrouve avec, par exemple, des collègues que que nous supervisons dans les pays ou bien les projets que nous recevons, on vous parle de l'agriculture sensible à la nutrition, mais évidemment parce que les gens n'ont pas été formés, pour eux, il s'agit juste d'écrire le mot. Mais quand vous regardez à l'intérieur du projet, il n'y a rien qui explique vraiment, qui montre comme action les liens agriculture sensible à la nutrition. Donc, au niveau de ces écoles, on a élaboré des modules de formation pour montrer comment est-ce qu'il faut produire, qu'est-ce qu'il faut produire pour améliorer donc l'état nutritionnel des enfants, notamment sur le côté qualitatif. On a impliqué tous les secteurs. Ce n'était pas seulement les questions de l'agriculture. Or, je sais qu'à la FAO, on a beaucoup plus tendance à travailler avec l'agriculture. On oublie souvent le secteur de la santé et le secteur de la santé lui-même pense que, bon, la FAO, c'est la chasse gardée du ministère de l'Agriculture. Donc, il est important pour nous d'amener tout le monde à travailler ensemble parce que nous avons besoin, dans ce domaine, des enseignants, mais nous avons besoin des agents d'agriculture, nous avons besoin des agronomes, nous avons besoin des nutritionnistes, nous avons besoin des communicateurs, nous avons besoin de pas mal de monde pour pouvoir faire passer les messages ou développer ce que nous voulons mettre en place. À côté de tout ça, là, il y a eu aussi l'utilisation des techniques de séchage parce qu'on veut montrer aux élèves comment est-ce qu'il faut produire, mais nous voulons aussi assurer la disponibilité. On ne faut pas produire pour gaspiller, mais il faut aussi apprendre à conserver. Et qu'est-ce que ça a donné comme résultat? Donc ça, j'ai anticipé donc sur les techniques de séchage. Vous voyez, pour préserver la qualité des aliments, on a utilisé donc des séchoirs avec du matériel local. Et quand vous regardez les feuilles vertes là, qui sont séchées à l'ombre dans ces séchoirs, en comparaison de ce qui est séché au soleil, la différence est très nette parce que le soleil a détruit les éléments nutritifs et donc même la personne peut dire j'ai mangé, mais en réalité elle a perdu une bonne partie de ce qu'elle devait avoir. Et les questions d'empaquetage sur l'autre côté maintenant, on a montré comment est-ce qu'il faut empaqueter, comment il faut garder, soit pour commercialiser, réduire la pauvreté, mais aussi chez soi, même quand on garde, il faut bien garder pour s'assurer que le côté sanitaire et tout ça là est bien préservé. Et vous regardez ce qu'indiquent les flèches là. C'était un TCP de 350 000 $ qu'on a eu pour 3 pays et qui a, avec le résultat, vous voyez, ça a permis de mobiliser 1 297 794 $ au niveau donc, du Cameroun parce que les communes se sont rendues compte de l'importance de cette expérience et elles ont voulu la développer. Donc pour nous, ça a été vraiment un succès et il y a d'autres pays qui sont en train de s'intéresser. Voilà. Et donc, après ce projet de 1 200 000 qui est actuellement en cours, donc vous voyez, ça, ce sont les élèves au niveau des écoles qui utilisent leurs produits. Très rapidement, maintenant, les questions de l'implication des parlementaires. En 2019, le bureau sous-régional a décidé, donc, suite à la déclaration de Madrid de 2018, d'organiser au niveau de tous les pays de la CAC un forum des parlementaires pour les impliquer dans les questions de sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle. Et c'est là que vous voyez ici, donc c'est au Congo, parrainé par le président de la République, que nous avons invité les 11 pays de la CAC pour organiser ces forums. Et nous avons mis au cours de ces forums-là, mis en place ce qu'on appelle le RAPACSAN, c'est le réseau des alliances parlementaires d'Afrique centrale pour la sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle. Et c'est au cours de ces forums que des textes statutaires ont été élaborés. Et la différence de ce que nous faisons en Afrique centrale par rapport aux autres pays, on a voulu que les présidents des assemblées s'impliquent. Donc, partout où nous avons une alliance parlementaire, le président de l'Assemblée nationale et le président donc de l'alliance, le président du Sénat et le président d'honneur. Parce que nous avons compris que si les présidents au plus haut niveau ne sont pas impliqués, c'est le parlementaire fera ce qu'il veut, mais les questions décisionnelles vont rester toujours, et nous allons voir le résultat que ça a donné. Donc, vous voyez, évidemment, pour le faire, après le forum, il a fallu qu'on aille dans les pays pour faire le plaidoyer, parce que ça, c'est le premier élément. Il faut essayer de convaincre pour que les gens comprennent pourquoi on veut faire ça. Et ça, c'est les différents pays. Et après le plaidoyer, il y a les questions de sensibilisation et de renforcement des capacités. Et je vous assure, quand on les faisait, il y avait des députés après qui nous disaient, mais comme par exemple le Gabon, ils ne peuvent pas du tout penser qu'il y a un problème de malnutrition là-bas. Ils étaient y compris même au Congo. Donc vous voyez, il y a des choses, tant qu'on ne dit pas que c'est la fin, la crise alimentaire, les gens pensent qu'ils sont à l'abri, alors que ce n'est pas le cas. Donc ça, c'est quelques exemples de journées que nous avons eues au niveau des différents pays. Et puis, à l'heure où nous sommes aujourd'hui, nous avons 9 pays de la sous-région que SFC couvre, et nous avons déjà 7 alliances sur 9 pays. On vient de nous ajouter le Burundi qui fait le 9e pays, où nous avons donc mis en place ces alliances. Et j'ai cité ici les pays. Et là, en février passé, nous avons organisé donc la réunion de ces présidents pour faire le bilan, pour faire le point de là où on en est. Et comme résultat concret, au niveau du Congo, par exemple, quand il y a eu les élections et qu'il y a eu, comment dirais-je, un nouveau parlement, dans ce nouveau parlement, il y a eu la création de commissions sur la sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle au niveau du Sénat, parce que pour nous, ça, c'est un acquis, et au niveau de l'Assemblée nationale elle-même. En RCA, ils ont profité de la révision de la Constitution pour intégrer dans leur article 47 le droit à une alimentation adéquate. Au niveau de Sao Tomé, on est en train de proposer une loi sur le transfert donc, des taxes sur l'alcool et les tabacs au programme national d'alimentation scolaire. Et évidemment, nous avons maintenant la mise en place de plateformes qui regroupent donc les parlementaires, le gouvernement et les législateurs. Donc, les contraintes qu'on a eues, c'est Covid, parce que pendant qu'on était en train de mettre en place les alliances, il y a eu Covid qui a bloqué. Il y a les questions de renouvellement de mandat qui nous amènent. Quand il y a une nouvelle législature, il faut revenir pour faire la mise à jour. Mais l'important, c'est que systématiquement aujourd'hui, dans les 4 pays où il y a eu de nouvelles élections, quand même il y a de nouveaux présidents, les alliances sont devenues comme un organe de l'Assemblée nationale. Et puis, il y a l'instabilité politique, les changements des membres. Donc voilà, et je vous remercie.
Thank you so much. I know that, originally it was not on the program, but we brought it in. I hope you are able to see, some of the ideas that we could actually pick, especially for the policy coherence and things like that. So I want you to take a moment and write down, some of the key things, that you are hearing from this presentation. I will take, questions. Let me take the last presentation, from ECOWAS, and then we will take, questions for answer. Allow me to just, squeeze, not squeeze, bring the ECOWAS presentation, then we will have, a Q&A. Okay. Thank you so much. So we will have an opportunity to ask questions for clarity. Ma'am, thank you. Okay. So this one? Yes. So just use. Shall we have the ECOWAS presentation loaded? Okay. Okay. So in the meantime, take a moment and really reflect on what you had, some of the questions that you want to ask. so that by the time we get to the Q&A, you are ready. So you're gonna use this one, and then you're trying to go back and use this one to place the pointer. Thank you so much. You need some encouragement.
Okay, thank you very much for the encouragement. My name is Abimbola Oyelonu, and I work with the ECOWAS Commission. The assignment before me this morning is to present us with an overview of the ECOWAS Social Protection Framework and its operational plan. So, before I delve into the presentation per se, I would like to present us with what I call the state of social protection in West Africa. While introducing myself, I mentioned that I work with the ECOWAS Commission, and the ECOWAS Commission, for those who do not know, is a regional economic community covering 15 plus or minus member states in West Africa. So the focus of this presentation is on West Africa. Now, the state of social protection. What I have done in this slide is to summarize the status of social protection using what I call the 3 C's: coverage, commitments, and challenges. Remember again that the context is West Africa. So now, coverage. Since we started this gathering yesterday, a lot has been said with regards to coverage issues. But what do we find in West Africa? On this slide, I present us with the statistics that we collected in the process of developing the ECOWAS Social Protection Framework. And as you can see, the range of coverage is from 0.9 to 51%. I mentioned earlier on that we are 15 member states. Even though some member states do not have data or didn't provide us with the data we required, we can safely assume that the range from the least to the highest ranges from 0.9 to 51%, with the least being Guinea-Bissau and the highest being Cape Verde. Even countries like my country, Nigeria, are not doing very well with regards to the coverage of social protection. You can see Nigeria, with a population of over 250 million people, it has a coverage rate of just 11%. The summary of this slide is that coverage in West Africa is very poor. In fact, according to the World Report on Social Protection, West Africa is lagging behind other regions of the continent. If you put this together to find an average, we can safely assume that the coverage of social protection in West Africa stands at about 13%. This is far below the global and continental averages. Now, in terms of commitments, I have talked about low coverage, but that doesn't mean that nothing is going on. In fact, ECOWAS member states recognize that social protection is a priority. A lot has been done, and studies have shown that 13 of the 15 member states of ECOWAS actually have a policy document or some kind of framework on social protection. Also, efforts are ongoing to develop national social protection flows. Now, aside from this, our member states have done very well with respect to ratification of legal and policy instruments on social protection. They have also developed frameworks for financing. Also, there are key strategic frameworks or policy documents. Let me also quickly mention that there are a lot of programs, a plethora of programs going on across the region, from school feeding, public works, cash transfers. There are so many. However, there are challenges. Most of our challenges center around the fact that These are the challenges, but I'm just saying that a lot of our programs are fragmented or ad hoc in nature. There's also another major challenge, which is that most of these programs are not grounded in any law. So there's no law backing them up. Aside from that, I have already talked about coverage before. Coverage is limited. Then we have insufficient development of social assistance schemes. There is limited access to healthcare programs and schemes. There's lack of coordination. This is also very critical. Throughout yesterday, the question of coordination and policy coherence kept on coming back. So we found in the course of our work that there is a lack of coordination. As I said before, most of our activities are ad hoc, they are fragmented, and so on and so forth. So there really is no coherence, despite the fact that social protection is a cross-cutting issue. Another challenge has to do with the inadequacy of programs for climate and humanitarian resilience. This was also mentioned yesterday and to some extent this morning. The issue of funding is very critical. Earlier on, I showed you the slide on coverage. Of course, you cannot talk about adequate coverage without adequate funding. So all of these issues are interlinked. There is inadequate funding. On my next slide, I will show you from available evidence the commitment of West African governments to funding social protection. Then lastly, weaknesses around monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. All of these challenges were documented from the study conducted on social protection in West Africa. Now, there is low investment in social protection expenditure in Africa in general and in West Africa specifically. The second bullet point is very, very profound in that it puts government expenditure on social protection in West Africa at less than 1%. The data we have shows that just about 1% of the GDP of West African countries goes to financing social protection. So naturally, the result is that coverage will be low, and that coverage is low, which is the obvious reality. I mean, most of the programs that are currently ongoing within the region are donor-driven. So, I mean, this is government spending, as I said, but of course we have received a lot of support from development partners, but we know the challenge with such programs, sustainability. So it is extremely critical to reverse this trend. Now, to the social protection framework itself. As I said before, what I have done in the previous slides was just to lay the foundation for the social protection framework of ECOWAS. Now, this is an initiative that started, the development of this document, that is, started about 7 years ago, and along the line, I mean, in the course of the journey, they received a lot of support from our partners, notably UNICEF and also FAO. So may I just seize this opportunity to thank FAO for the support that we got towards finalizing the framework. So now the framework. The framework was necessitated by the poor status of social protection in the region. Background and rationale. Why the framework? Now, there is a collective moral as well as a legal obligation on leaders in the ECOWAS region, and that is derived from Article 4 of the revised treaty. There is an obligation to emphasize human rights amongst member states for social development. Also, the ECOWAS Vision 2050 prioritizes regional economic integration for socioeconomic development and also highlights the key role of social protection in achieving the SDGs. So this is the current strategy that ECOWAS is implementing, the ECOWAS Vision 2050. And that document clearly emphasizes the importance of social protection. Now, the framework itself, what does it seek to achieve? So this slide answers the what. The why the social protection framework. And the answer is that the framework is intended to provide a broad set of guidelines and principles to ECOWAS, that's the regional body, as well as member states in the design and delivery of social protection interventions. So this document is a minimum standards document. As I said before, our member states are not lagging behind when it comes to frameworks and all of that. But from the analysis we did, most of their frameworks and policies are lopsided. It's either they are skewed towards one side or the other. So this document, as I said, sets to provide some minimum guidance as to what is expected of all ECOWAS member states. This effort is driven by the principle that the provision of comprehensive and adequate social protection will contribute to the improvement in the quality of life of the citizenry. If you do some further analysis on the status of countries in West Africa, I think about 2 or 3 are about the poorest in the world. I mean, the indices are quite poor. So we see social protection as a measure that is capable of improving the quality of life of West African citizens. What are the highlights of the document? What would you see in the document? First of all, it aligns with ECOWAS Vision 2050. The mission of the document is to promote robust social protection systems across member states. Expected outcomes. We expect accelerated investments and collaborative agendas with partners. Now, the document also addresses cross-border challenges. Migration issues are captured there, food insecurity, as well as issues of natural disasters. Now, the document envisages a lot of collaboration between the ECOWAS Commission as well as other key stakeholders. Now, targets. The document targets these categories of people and adopts the life cycle approach in so doing. Young women and girls, older persons, persons with disabilities, migrants and rural workers, IDPs, asylum seekers, persons living with chronic illnesses. I need to quickly mention that the document is clearly aligned to the AU protocol that Gabby presented earlier on. Now, with that, I have come to the end of the presentation on the framework itself. But the framework is not a standalone document. The framework provides us with the broad principles, restates the facts, and all of that. But the social protection framework is accompanied by an operational plan. The operational plan contains concrete actions that can be taken to address all of those challenges that I mentioned previously. Now, the operational plan is a roadmap for member states in extending and strengthening their respective social protection policies and programs. As I said before, all member states, or most member states, 13 out of the 15, have some kind of strategy, have some kind of document or framework. But this document is basically, as I said, a guidance framework, a minimum standards document, which sets out to help member states in their attempt to extend and strengthen their respective social protection programs and policies. The operational plan rests on 7 objectives. I do not have the objectives on the slide, but I would like to read them out. The first objective deals with enhancing understanding of concepts, theories, emerging issues, and trends in social protection. This is very important because we, in the course of our research, discovered that most member states define, or rather have maybe a myopic perspective of social protection. Some of the definitions of social protection, according to national documents, are not broad or robust enough. So the first objective tries to remedy that by dealing with capacity. 5 more minutes, I'll be done. So the second objective deals with increasing coverage and adequacy of social protection. The third objective under the operational plan has to do with improvement of policies and identification of strategies to reduce the impact of crisis and build resilience. The region, as we currently speak, is very fragile and in dire need of such strategies that help with resilience building. Number 4 objective is on improving the fiscal space. There's a whole section of the social protection framework that is devoted to strategies for increasing the fiscal space. Number 9 has to do with resilience building against the impacts of climate change and other shocks, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. 6 talks about the linkages between social protection and the humanitarian development and peace nexus. Lastly, objective 7 has to do with governance, coordination, and monitoring. So that's a breakdown of the 7 objectives that I just read out. There are about 50 specific activities set to actualize these objectives. We have an annual target set over 5 years. In the document, we have identified lead and partnering institutions for each activity as well. So this is my conclusion. As we stand currently, the document has received a lot of acceptance and approval across the board. Last year, in November, ministers in charge of social protection in the ECOWAS region validated the document. So we have received, as I said, the document has received acceptance and approval across the board by our ministers, by our experts, and it's also generating a lot of interest amongst partners. So where we stand currently is that the documents would be presented to the ECOWAS Council of Ministers this July for adoption. And once it is adopted, it is a done deal and, open for implementation across the region. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Okay, so we're going to take maybe literally 5 minutes, not more, just to take some questions for clarity before we transition to the next, program. Okay, literally questions for clarity for our 3 speakers. We'll modify the program a little bit, but we be rest assured that, we're going to cover everything that we plan to cover today. Your hand was first. Let me see. Let me see some more questions. I've got 2 here. Do we have any question online? David? No one. Okay, so you'll be first. There is one online? Okay, let me start with the online participant. Please, the online participant, question for clarity. Just introduce yourself and let us go straight to the question.
Good morning. I want to first thank Bianca for the presentation. My question is very simple. The ECOWAS region suffers from freedom of movement of people within the ECOWAS region. And one of the ways to ease that freedom and foster collaboration among the ECOWAS region countries is to ensure that social protection systems, for example, management delivery systems are interoperable. For example, someone who has health insurance in Nigeria moves to Ghana should also still be able to enjoy similar health insurance program, despite the fact that they have only paid their premium in Nigeria. What is ECOWAS doing to ensure that we have this system that sort of allows for integration and collaboration of social protection system within the ECOWAS region? And if possible, can this framework captures that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that question. She's writing it down. We're going to respond. Let me go to you very quick, and we have, two gentlemen there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I have two questions. One regarding the first presentation on nutrition. So I was wondering how, because you were talking about the legal frameworks and coordination mechanism that you established in Central Africa regarding food security and nutrition. I was wondering how social protection is included in there, and what is the role of the Ministry in charge of social protection? So the first question. And second question, very quickly, it's about the ECOWAS framework. I was wondering, in the action plan or roadmap that you mentioned, is there any, let's say, targeted commitment in financing social protection in terms of, what is a goal in terms of percentage of GDP allocated for, because it's very low in the region. I'm wondering if there is any target there. Thank you.
Let me take, two more questions. I think, two more questions, and then I'll give you an opportunity to respond. Yes, sir.
Yes, my question goes to the ECOWAS presenter. I'm just wondering, what are the incentives and sanctions for member states to adapt and implement this ECOWAS agenda?
Okay, Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. The question here is for ECOWAS. Considering that this seems to be a powerful come together of people in the same region, and they are the same people as well who are part of the AU agreement relating to the protocol on social protection. That double impact, do you think it is going to make a huge difference in terms of how countries are going to implement social protection? Or do you think that people are going to be having too many things to look at and possibly come up with not much because their attention is divided somehow? Thanks.
Let me take more questions. I give you, and then that will be the last one. Yes.
It's less a question for the panel, but for colleagues that are representing civil society, different forms of civil society organizations, including universities. I see this, there's a growing trend even internationally to support countries in developing frameworks, financing frameworks, policy frameworks, but we see that even when these are in place, coverage is very low. So I'm wondering, what role can civil society play in ensuring that these frameworks become action?
Yeah, for me, it's not a question, it's just a contribution. But I'm going to speak in French, please. Je voulais juste faire une petite contribution à la présentation de notre collègue Aïcha sur la nutrition. Juste pour mettre en relief, en fait, la contribution d'une approche qui est vraiment nutrition sensible. Je veux parler, en fait, de l'approche Cash Plus, où la FAO a beaucoup d'expérience, surtout en Afrique de l'Ouest, où nous avons fait beaucoup d'expériences. On a combiné en fait des appuis contributifs, des appuis productifs avec du cash, surtout adressé aux femmes, et combiné avec des sensibilisations en éducation nutritionnelle, et ça a donné beaucoup de résultats positifs en matière de nutrition. C'est juste ce complément que je voulais faire. Merci.
Thank you, because I'm only taking one round of questions. So let me take that burning one, and you'll be the last one. I'm not looking anymore. I'll be facing this.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
My question goes to ECOWAS. Looking at the chart, your presentation, there was this particular chart you showed us where you had Cape Verde, Ghana, and the rest actually doing better than the other countries. So my question is ECOWAS trying to promote sharing of experiences among these countries? Obviously, there are countries that are doing well and others are not doing well with regards to maybe best practices and maybe financing of social protection. So what is ECOWAS doing towards that? Thank you.
Okay, I take the last one.
Thank you. My question is addressed to Gabi. African Continental Social Protection Document is signed by only 2 countries and ratified by only 1 country. In addition, ECOWAS states are investing less than 1% of their GDP on social protection. What could explain this low commitment at country level? Thank you.
Good. I give to the panelists, to respond. Maybe we start with ECOWAS because you have a lot of questions. Very, very quick.
Thank you very much for all the questions. I understood some, while some were not too clear. I would ask for clarity when I get there. I'll start with the very last question, which asked what exactly ECOWAS is doing to promote information exchange. Thank you very much for your question. For about 2-3 years now, we have initiated the Regional Dialogue on Social Protection in the ECOWAS region. This is a platform for peer learning, information sharing, and all of that. So to some extent, I can answer your question in the affirmative by saying that ECOWAS has already initiated a platform for experience sharing. But beyond that platform, we're looking towards organizing peer exchanges, peer-to-peer learning. Last year in November in Banjul, the Honorable Minister of Cape Verde actually launched the request for other member states to come and learn from Cape Verde, which is doing very well in regards to social protection. So yes, we are on track regarding information sharing and exchange. Now, incentives to implement the framework. This is a very tough question because we're dealing with sovereign states. ECOWAS can sanction, but sanction as a last resort. We use persuasive means to make sure that member states fulfill their obligations under community law. But as a last resort, when push comes to shove, sanctions are imposed, but not with regards to the implementation of frameworks of this nature. What we can do is to advocate, continue to educate, and use our statutory organs to make sure that member states implement their obligations. Of course, we can also use our, as I said, statutory organs to some extent, name and shame. But we are very mindful and we try as much as possible to respect the sovereignty of all member states in so doing. Another question had to do with goals regarding financing. As I said, the framework has a section devoted to financing. We didn't set a clear target as to what we expect member states to commit in terms of the percentage of their GDP to commit. But through our mechanisms, we try as much as possible to advocate for increased funding of social protection. Again, we cannot compel. We can just advocate and continue to use some soft measures to ensure that member states live up to their obligation. The first question had to do with portability of social protection rights. Okay, so in this area, ECOWAS has some experience, but we have started by advocating for portability of social security rights. Social security rights of migrant workers who have served in one country and then retired and gone back to their country. So we are already intervening in that regard. But to answer your question, which is broader, we haven't started anything yet. There's no intervention yet targeting portability of the broad range of social security benefits. Yes, the question that had to do with obligations under a multiplicity of instruments. Please, could you reframe? I'm talking to my sister over there. I didn't quite get your question. Could you please reframe?
Okay, thank you so much. Referring to the relationship between ECOWAS and the African Union Protocol on Social Security and Social Protection, that we have the same members that are under ECOWAS, who have also, the leaders have also signed up and agreed to the protocol on social protection. That division in attention between the two regional organizations by countries, do you see it as something that will benefit the ECOWAS members, Or is it something that will draw their attention, will divide their attention somehow? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Gabby just used the word complementarity. The two documents are mutually inclusive, not exclusive. They are there to sharpen each other. As I said, our framework adopts the definition of social protection in the AU protocol. So yes, there's a lot to benefit from that document. They complement each other.
Okay, so let me give, the other speakers just to respond. I think there was a question to you and the question to Gabby, so that we can close the session. Yeah. I think it was a comment. No, I think it was not for you online. Yeah, or maybe let me give to Gabby. I think there was a question for AU. Even the question from you, yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. I think she didn't write it down. Maybe you have to respond. Yeah.
Right. No, I did ask you a question regarding your work in Central Africa, and like how, because you were mentioning that you established coordination mechanism, but also legal framework around food security and nutrition. And I was wondering what is the place there of social protection, like how is it integrated, whether in the coordination mechanism or in the legal framework? How social protection was captured, because you didn't cover it in your presentation, so thank you.
Ok, je vais vous répondre alors en français. D'accord. Alors, quand ces alliances-là de parlementaires sont mises en place, chaque pays, je dis bien, a ses textes statutaires parce que chaque pays a ses particularités. Alors, dans ces textes statutaires, les contributions sont bien identifiées et comment l'alliance va fonctionner aussi figure dans les textes, tout ce qui est obligatoire. À côté de ça, il y a une feuille de route qui est développée. Et maintenant, en fonction, ce que je n'ai pas noté ici, c'est que dans chaque pays, on fait ce qu'on appelle l'analyse documentaire pour voir les lois et les règlements qui existent en faveur du programme de sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle. Et sur cette base, quand le pays identifie la problématique, par exemple, si je prends le cas de Sao Tomé, par exemple, c'est un pays qui a des cantines scolaires, mais qui connaît énormément de problèmes parce que les fonds ne sont pas toujours disponibles. Donc, ils sont en train d'étudier une loi pour que les fonds sur le tabac et l'alcool soient systématiquement versés à ces programmes-là. Ça, c'est un. La deuxième chose, le règlement qu'il y a au niveau de l'organe pour qu'il y ait une continuité et que ça ne soit pas juste parce que c'est ce Parlement-là qui est là, il est aussi inscrit que même quand il y a une nouvelle législature, l'Alliance est un organe. C'est pour cela qu'on a pas seulement les députés qui sont membres, mais il y a des gens de l'administration, même au niveau de l'Assemblée, qui siègent dedans pour qu'il y ait une continuité. Donc, nous avons eu 4 pays comme ça qui ont eu de nouvelles législatures, mais systématiquement, l'Alliance, et il y a des réunions régulières qu'il y a, et il y a des thématiques qui sont développées. Ce n'est pas seulement les thématiques de la FAO, mais aussi du PAM, qui intervient beaucoup dans le domaine de la protection sociale, et aussi de l'UNICEF, qui est le champion aussi dans les questions de protection sociale. Et on développe des thématiques au niveau de l'hémicycle. Ce n'est pas que parce que l'information et la sensibilisation pour nous des parlementaires, elle est continue. Donc, dans la feuille de route, on essaie chaque fois de développer ces points-là et de façon à ce que ça soit intégré, que ça soit dans la protection sociale, que ça soit dans c'est plusieurs thématiques en fait. Mais pour nous, le fait de développer, de faire ressortir des fonds pour le programme, parce qu'à Sao Tomé, par exemple, les enfants n'ont qu'un repas, par exemple, par jour. Donc, c'est le repas au niveau scolaire qui aide à améliorer. Et les lois aussi qui sont signées nous aident pour nous aussi dans le domaine de la protection sociale de ces enfants-là. Merci à vous.
Thank you. I think there was one question for AU, the AU protocol. Maybe just respond to that and then we close the session.
So basically, Hassan, you were asking about the low commitment. So you can actually put it in, what we see is actually high commitment in terms of aspiration and low commitment in terms of practice. And in a way, to explain that is that, as I mentioned in the presentation, that COVID was a watershed for social protection. Pre-COVID, many countries were basically motivated or governed by the whole macroeconomic principle, where basically, as you would remember, it was the whole emphasis of trickle-down economics that eventually vulnerable people will be reached. We saw that that was not the case. And so we transitioned to what we call pro-growth. So with COVID, and we've seen the commitment now of heads of state, what we're beginning to see now is a greater shift towards the recognition that unless you address the vulnerability of the poor, you cannot have economic growth. Hence, the importance, again, of what we heard so many times, of making the economic case for social protection. So, in a way, so we can just, in a nutshell, say what we're seeing is high commitment in terms of aspiration, as we see with the signing of the protocol, as we've seen with the ECOWAS, but in reality, low commitment in terms of practice.
Thank you so much. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much. So let me see if okay, I think we can sit down. Thank you so much. Let me see if my negotiation skills are good enough. As you can see, we're running a little bit late in terms of the program, but I promise you we'll be able to, navigate and bring that. We are supposed to have a panel discussion. We only have 4 panelists. So I would still like us to conclude that before we go for the tea break. Yeah? I'm looking at you. Let me actually take off my glasses so that I see your facial reactions. Tit for tat, yeah. Tit for tat. Remember you guys, you came here at 9:30 and 8:30. So tit for tat. You stole my time, I steal yours. So it's tit for tat, but at least we'll have, some way to navigate. Yeah? Yeah? So we take, the panel discussion. We see how far it goes. Maybe we give you 30, 35 minutes, because it's just four panelists. And I think you made it nicely yesterday with 8, speakers. I think we can actually do that. Thank you so much for your understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lamy. And thank you to the presenters this morning. A very good job done. Thank you for the ones that improvised and came in to give additional insights on the nutrition discussion. The panel for this morning, the first panel this morning at least, is looking at just the discussions that we've had around the regional frameworks, right, for social protection. So I'm going to invite my panelists to come and join me up front. Our time is negotiated again, so we will try and keep within 30, 35 minutes. So I won't take up too much time. Let me invite Honorable Flavia Kavahenda. Is she here with us this morning? Please welcome her. So she's a, she's a Ugandan Member of Parliament. She's also the chairperson of the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. So welcome, ma'am. She's a powerhouse in social protection. I've had opportunity to interact with her before. And then let me invite back Ms. Abimbola. Please forgive me if I am butchering your name. I invite you to do the same back, tit for tat. You can put your mind back. I'll invite Ms. Alice Carrara. She's the Program Officer, Labor and Migration, with the ESC Secretariat. And lastly, none other than Ms. Priscilla Gavi, the chairperson of the Africa Platform for Social Protection in Africa. A power-packed panel, well gender balanced. We love to see it. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the format that we'll follow for the discussion, we'll just go straight into it and we'll have like a back and forth. I'll invite you to just provide initial insights and then I'll pose questions that you can just respond to. So maybe before we start with the round of questions, just quickly, anything generically based on your perspectives, your experience, your knowledge in this area, anything that you'd like to share in a minute or two around the regional frameworks for social protection at regional level, at continental level, etc. I'll start with you, Honorable.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kabahenda Flavia Rwabhoro. I chair the Committee on Gender, Labor and Social Development in the Parliament of Uganda, and it's a statutory committee. I am also part of the founding, and I'm now the chair of the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. You will realize that the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection is not a constitutional committee in Parliament, but going by the Commonwealth practices, it is a pressure group. But because we are African, we call it an advocacy group, so that we don't seem to intimidate anyone by calling it a pressure group. But we are glad that the Parliament of Uganda allows such groups, because our committees can be so large, like my Committee on Gender, Labor and Social Development handles women, children, people with disabilities, labor, equal opportunities, everything. And so the committee with the time may not necessarily go in depth into matters pertaining specific items. And so honorable members of Parliament who hold a common interest on a subject matter like social protection will come together and form an association into which they will deal so intentionally with the subject matter of social protection. Because we collaborate with partners, we collaborate with the Parliament leadership, we collaborate with academia and all the players in social protection. And then afterwards, we go and meet the Committee on Gender, Labor and Social Development, which is the bedrock for social protection. And we present issues papers and we present position papers so that the committee can write their reports and be able to present on the floor of Parliament. So we are an advocacy team. And we have clear objectives, and our objectives as the Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection is, first of all, to make social protection, give it a political approach. For us, we gave it a political approach, and we go to the communities and meet with leaders and meet with people and talk about social protection for them to understand and claim it from their leaders. Actually, in the 9th Parliament, after the 9th Parliament, very many members of Parliament could not come back to the 10th Parliament after they could not deliver SAGE, the social assistance grants for older persons. So the communities were wild. They said, how do you sit in Parliament for 5 years and we cannot be on SAGE? Because we were trying to advocate that government rolls out the senior citizens grants, which were being piloted in very few districts. And so for us, we made sure that the communities were up. There is a time when one member of Parliament, who is now a minister, the MP who was representing Yumbe district, she carried her older persons to Ruakitura, to the president's residence, and said, here they are, you find what to do with them. They don't get the grant. and then the president pronounced that Yumbe must be put on board. And then that's when our advocacy was up. We said, oh, so we should tell every district to bring their older persons to your home before you can declare a rollout. So we were now so up into the advocacy until government had to release and say, okay, we shall scale up. But
Perfect.
even on the scale up, they raised the age from 65 to 80. And so our advocacy continues that the age of eligibility must go back to 65 because we cannot be giving air. How many older persons are 80 years? And in any case, will they even enjoy the money? They cannot eat anymore. So now you cannot be providing air and then you thump your chest that you are doing anything about social protection. So our advocacy is still up in the air. The Right Honorable Speaker is our patron. Even the former Honorable Speaker was our patron. We even traveled to UK to go and talk to the UK Parliament, which was giving us donations for social protection, to make sure that we present a case that Parliament is going to make sure that government provides appropriate financing. It may not be adequate, but we want appropriate financing for social protection. Also to talk about the synergies.
Honorable, sorry, I'll invite you to come back a little later, just so we can have others also provide their perspective.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So she provides like a very good picture of what happens at national level in the absence of proper legal frameworks. And I think that's very useful to think about, because yesterday the discussion of the political economy was very hot. It came up a number of times. And I think somebody raised the issue of what happens when you anchor your social protection systems on the politics. So thank you for that perspective, very helpful. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Amim Mbola.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. So yes, my perspective is from the regional level. The Honorable Parliamentarian has provided us with insights into what happens at national level. But I mean, coming from the regional level, where we have a multiplicity of actors, a multiplicity of issues, a lot of stakeholders who are working on the same subject matter, but to a large extent, working at cross purposes. So what's the value of the ECOWAS Social Protection Framework is that it provides us with a platform through which all of these stakeholders can build synergies, through which all of these stakeholders can interact and interlink their approaches. The framework provides us with, as I said earlier on, concrete measures for financing social protection, which is extremely key given the low coverage of social protection in the West African region. The issue of capacity building is also something I would like to stress, which is carefully addressed in the operational plan of the social protection framework. From the analysis we did in the process of developing this document, we found out that, I mean, there are varying definitions of social protection across the 15 ECOWAS member states. So, I mean, everybody is defining it from the point where they stand, which is okay, but there is need to have a minimum benchmark for all member states. So, in terms of capacity building, this is one area where ECOWAS needs to do a lot. COVID exposed a lot of inadequacies with regards to social protection in the system, in the region. So one thing we're also trying to do is to build shock-responsive social protection systems, systems that are built on data, built on partnerships, collaboration, coordination, and so on and so forth. So I would like to stop there. Yeah. But I wanted to emphasize that, as I said before, there is a lot of acceptance of this document, especially by the ministers in charge of social protection. It holds a lot of potential for transforming the social protection landscape of the region. However, it will take some time. So we need to manage our expectations. The document itself is barely 3 months old. But as I said, it is a document that has potential to transform the social protection landscape of the region.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Sorry, Ms. Alice.
All protocols observed. Earlier I had gone ahead of time just to show that I'm also particular in going ahead of time in terms of providing for social protection. So My name is Aris Karara again. I am here to represent the East African Community Secretariat by providing the policy and legal framework around social protection. Yeah, first of all, the East African Community, maybe for those who are not aware, is now a member state bloc, 8 member states bloc, with the youngest being the Federal Republic of Somalia, which joined early this year, following the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of South Sudan, Republic of Burundi, Republic of Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and the United Republic of Tanzania. So maybe just to say that social protection is a very big pillar in terms of the provisions and guiding frameworks that guide the East African community, starting from the treaty that establishes the community that was operationalized in 2000. It provides for harmonization of social policies, labor, and just to support the free movement of persons. It is also anchored in the East African Community Common Market Protocol, which aims to support the realization of the major treaty provisions on the same. Then the social protection again is anchored, or it is provided for under the East African Community Vision 2050. I saw ECOWAS has the same, and also provides for social security, social protection in terms of member states to harmonize their social protection and social security policies. And then under the common market, particularly Article 39 specifies member states to develop social policies that will aim to protect the vulnerable communities. So those are the major regional frameworks that are in place. But to come down to the implementation of those provisions, the East African community is now in the process of developing the specific social protection policy. Right now, as we speak, the validation is taking place in Kigali, and the policy provides for rural development and rural communities in terms of social protection. I did not highlight that our community is now composed, or it has 300+ million people, of whom 30% are in rural communities. That means social protection needs to really take place so that all those are covered in the implementation of those global frameworks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a very useful and very integrated perspective that you've given us that I find very enriching for the discussion that we're having here, linking not only social protection, talking about rural development, as well as the trade aspect of it. So thank you very much for those perspectives. Yes, Ms. Priscilla Gabi from a civil society perspective.
Thank you very much. Yes, Priscilla Gavi is my name. My background is in aging. I work for HelpAge Zimbabwe, and as you know, in old age, social protection is really what we want to focus on. And as a continent in Africa, aging is a big issue. However, I am here wearing the hat for Africa Platform for Social Protection, which is an African platform registered with a secretariat in Kenya. And this organization works with platforms throughout Africa, 27 platforms in particular, and we are hoping to form more platforms in different countries as well. The aim is to empower civil society to be able to engage their governments in a way that will make it possible for governments to deliver, to implement inclusive social protection. Africa is Africa, economically, socially, politically. What we experience as Africans is the same, And the aim of the platform is to be able to bring together, after the realization that there are so many social protection schemes and programs scattered all over in each and every country, and these schemes are not able to come together and be able to deliver a social protection scheme that will assist and alleviate Africans to come out of poverty. From the discussions that we've had, you've realized that uptake is about 14%, and most countries actually, although they have social protection schemes on paper, very little is done on the ground. My country is an example. We have so many schemes that are supposed to be running, but you don't see them on the ground. So the aim for the Africa Platform for Social Protection is to make sure that at a local level, at national level, bring together the grassroots organizations, bring together the NGOs, bring together the government, all stakeholders come together and be able to agree on how best to bring out the citizens from a state of living in poverty. The aim as well is to be able to empower the citizenry to be able to question whoever is bringing in a form of social protection, be it a cash transfer, be it food and non-food items. The citizenry should be able to question why they are getting those kind of handouts, for how long they will be getting them. And if they don't get them as promised, they should also be able to question. And this is done through trainings that Africa Platform for Social Protection is supporting local NGOs to carry out within the communities. And so there is interaction that is coming right from the grassroots. From the grassroots, it also goes up to the government at national level, and it goes to regional level, interacting with organizations like the African Union to try and come together and make sure that there is a legal way of bringing countries to be able to be answerable to their citizens. And this is the work that a PSP has done in providing technical support in coming up with the AU protocol, not only on social protection and social security, but also on protocol on aging, protocol on disability. Technical support has been provided by the Africa Platform for Social Protection. So I think for now I'll stop there.
Perfect. So striking the balance between social accountability, interacting with the communities, and also influencing policy and legal frameworks. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've heard quite a bit now in terms of the perspectives that you provided. I want to bring it back to Alice. Alice, you've spoken about the mix of legal frameworks that are being developed and are being implemented in the ESC region. I'm just wondering from your perspective, based on what you've shared, what regional initiatives do you have that foster collaboration across stakeholders? Because like you've mentioned, you're bringing in trade actors, you're bringing in social protection itself, and you're bringing in community involvement. What collaboration initiatives have you implemented as an ESC to bring important stakeholders together to interact in this regard?
Thank you, moderator. Maybe let me say that, that the East African community partner states agreed to move together. And implementation of all the initiatives that take place is using whole of government, whole of society approach. But particularly to the East African community, we undertake social dialogues to bring all the stakeholders to speak and address some of the challenges that are facing the implementation of these legal and policy frameworks. We have the Forum of SG, which brings together all the partners involved, donors, civil society, private sector, employers, and so on, trade unions, and so on, which is supposed to be an annual event. And so all the stakeholders come together to speak about social protection and other concepts that are concerning the community in general. We have under the gender department, we have the same kind of arrangement, but limited to the sector, which brings together all the practitioners in the area of social protection. Even though I said that the social protection policy is being developed, it doesn't mean that EAC is not implementing social protection initiatives. We have the gender policy that was adopted in 2018. We have child policy that was adopted in 2013, and youth policy, which is also implementing the components of social protection. And we also have we have other policies, such as we recently we are tabling. I mean, we finished the social protection, social security benefits coordination mechanism for the region, and it describes, you know, the stakeholders that will be taking place. I mean, will be meeting to speak and provide for social security coordination. So we have the frameworks, we have the tripartite agreement, which brings together even beyond the region, so to see the best practices in this concept or in this sector.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, an elaborate picture there of how you're enabling engagement across the range of stakeholders. Okay, so maybe Honorable and Priscilla, you can also jump in on this one, because we're talking at the regional level and the continental level, but then the last mile is really at the country level. And that's where we need these laws to be applied in practice. So while the continental and regional levels can set this enabling environment, what we need to see is actual change at country level. What do you find is the missing link in terms of getting it right at country level, moving from what Gabby called the aspirations of the legal frameworks and the practice at country level? Honorable?
Yeah, for us as Uganda, like you heard from Minister of Gender yesterday, we already have a national social protection policy, and Minister of Gender has already developed the national social protection strategy. But for us as the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, we are looking at a law. We want the Social Protection Act. And we would like to hear even about a Social Protection Act from the East African community, because then that emphasizes to all of us, the member states, that the social protection aspect now becomes more serious. So for us as Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, we are advocating for now a national social protection law that will have all these components on informal sector, social protection, a revision about the pension, the public works pensions, that will ensure that the social protection up to the last person of the country, and that social protection becomes a right and not just
charity.
A charity or something like we are giving it because we need votes, because this will now get us away from the whims and wishes of individuals in government claiming that I am the one who brought it, I'm the one who brought it, because it will be compelling. There will be sanctions for those who are not compliant. In the Parliament of Uganda, we even passed the certificate of gender and equity to every sector. You cannot have a budget passed unless you comply to the gender and equity certificate. So we can as well go ahead and have a certificate on social protection, that every plan of every sector must have a social protection component in them before we can pass your budget, because it becomes now a necessity for the people where majority lives in the rural, and they are battling with a lot of things that really need government to support them. We are also looking at the Office of the Prime Minister coordinating really well, because there is a time when I visited the Minister of Finance on these issues of social protection, and then the ministry, some budget officer was saying, now you know, when we continue to give these handouts to the older persons, their numbers are going to grow and we shall be overwhelmed. Then I said, but you are talking like you are not an economist. You are giving money to the youth, you are giving money to the women to support them. I thought you are building resilience so that by the time these people age, they are not a liability anymore. I thought you were linking that. So the Office of the Prime Minister needs to be intentional on linking and synergizing. If we are supporting the youth, we are supporting the women, we should be able to track them so that by the time it's old age, they are not asking for any other handouts or cash grants.
Beautiful.
And so as a Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, for us, we are bent on ensuring that every sector understands, like my sister said, the definition must be clear to them of social protection, and also the appropriate financing, like we have struggled for this coming budget that we are passing at Parliament. This time we struggled, and at least we have achieved to recover the budget that the Minister of Finance had slashed, but out of a lot of efforts, press conferences and everything. So we want to thank our partners that are giving us evidence-based information, which we relay to Parliament, and Parliament really agrees with us on how to say.
Yeah, that's very well put. So you're
and of
taking
course, allow me to say that now government has developed a national strategy on disaster risk management, which for long we have been asking for. Now we are only waiting for them on the National Health Insurance Scheme, and also the food and nutrition policy from the Office of the Prime Minister.
Okay. All right. So you're taking it from, there needs to be some action that will start at regional level, just below the African level, at regional level, a legal framework that will support action at national level, and then anchoring it at national level within your own legal framework that will make social protection binding, and then getting the institutional framework right. So yeah, thank you very much. Priscilla?
Thank you so much, Mutali. I will talk about issues of financing as a gap, in the sense that most governments, most African governments, we've realized, are not prepared as yet to commit themselves to fund social protection on their own. Most of the social protection schemes that you find in Africa are sponsored by donors. And this is because we do not have adequate data as to how many people out there require social protection support. We do not have enough information as to how much it would cost. If you take, for example, the example of the older persons, those are people that you know are going to require social protection in many ways until the time that they die. And the numbers of older persons in different countries, they fluctuate. The Honorable MP here has mentioned the fact that the figure would range from 80 to 65 to 70. And this is what happens in most countries. In terms of benefits that older persons should be getting, the age keeps on changing. Simply because people are shifting the financial burden further and further until people are no longer there to benefit from what their governments are offering. So we need information, we need data as to how many people need this social protection and what is it that they require. If it is health insurance, how much is it going to cost? The fear of not being able to afford is there everywhere, but we know it has been displaced by the COVID. During the COVID time, we've all been saying that we realize that governments can actually afford some of these things that they thought all along could not be afforded. I would also talk about the people themselves not knowing that it is their right to be looked after as a gap. People don't know that governments should be looking after them. That when you become vulnerable, you belong to the state. The state should look after you. And people are not making enough demands from their governments. An example of older persons who can go to a government hospital when you reach 65, you can go there and be treated for free. People don't go to hospitals for consultation because they think they are going to pay, but it is their right. People don't know their rights. That's another thing. And people are not free to air their grievances in Africa. For one reason or another, people think that when you are complaining, you are insulting the politicians, but it is not like that. People should be able to come out, and that secrecy, where you have people hiding their grievances, is what is causing the big gap that we see from the commitment that the politicians would have given at AU level, for example, and what is taking place at national level. There is a huge difference. The other issue is also the issue of the laws that we have in different countries. lack of policies that support social protection schemes at national level, it means that not much is going to be done. People are not going to come up with the social protection frameworks. People are not going to come up together as clusters even in social protection to discuss the issues that are going around. Because then the law within those countries is not creating that space. And this is the reason now why we now look up to the protocol on social protection, to say that the heads of state in all countries in Africa have agreed that there is need to look at social protection from that level. So if that commitment is there at that level, these are politicians, and they will need people who are going to be driving them from the bottom to make sure that whatever they committed at that high level is going to take place at national level. And that is the force that we try and bring in as civil society and drive people to come together and say, if these guys have committed, where are we? Let's come together, let's push them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the aspect again of the legal framework, the social contract, creating this demand, from the population that deserves to be receiving social protection benefits and receiving that protection from the state, the political will, indeed. So maybe I bring it back to Ms. Amimbola, because ECOWAS has gone ahead of the curve. You have achieved a significant milestone in having this common framework for the region. Are there any lessons that you can offer for other regions that will be important for us to pick up and to, as we're looking forward, like what can be done? How has this worked for you? What challenges did you encounter? And what can we do to accelerate the development of frameworks at regional level?
Thank you very much. In terms of the lessons that I'd like to share, I'd like to first of all emphasize the need for consultation. Consultations across a broad spectrum of stakeholders. As we all know, this subject matter is one that touches on a lot of developmental issues. So it's very critical to carry every stakeholder along from the very beginning. The second lesson I'd like to share has to do with data. Any social protection policy framework or law whatsoever must be anchored in data. Without data, we cannot plan. And that is why when we were starting this journey, we started with a study which sought to x-ray or analyze the situation of social protection across the 15 member states. Aside from data, there's need for a lot of patience and persistence. Our journey took about 7 years. Yes, we started this as far back as 2017, if I am right. And along the lines, I think we engaged about 2 or 3 different consultants, each one of them coming with their own perspective. Because as I said before, everybody is perceiving or viewing social protection from their own standpoint. While ILO is particular about the migrant worker, the rights of pension, social security, and all of that. UNICEF is concerned about social assistance and so on and so forth. So it's important to be very persistent and patient. It's not a journey for the faint-hearted, if I can put it that way. But at the end of it all, we were able to build consensus. Consensus building is yet another lesson that I need to flag off. It's very important to have the buy-in of all stakeholders as early as possible, so that when it comes to implementation, there would be no challenges. I would also like to share on capacity building. This issue cannot be overemphasized. I heard the distinguished speaker from Zimbabwe talking about the demand. There's a lot of ignorance. People are not pushing. Why? Because they do not know. So we have to bridge that gap. We have to fill up that missing link. So those are some of the lessons I'd like to share from ECOWAS. Again, data is key. Consultation is key. It's very important to have all the stakeholders around the table from the very beginning. Because of the nature of ECOWAS as a regional economic community, I talked about the importance of the ministers in charge of social protection. And I mean, this still emphasizes the importance of carrying everybody along. So the technical experts, the sectoral ministers, and members of parliament to some extent. We are going to present this document to the ECOWAS parliament next month. That is for us as ECOWAS, just to show that it involves a broad range of stakeholders. Thank you.
So having political, strategic, and technical leadership, agreeing on what it means for the region, and then getting consensus from everybody and building capacities. Perfect. Okay, so now let's bring it home. We're discussing social protection broadly, but we're also discussing it specifically as it relates to rural development. How are these frameworks enabling rural development in our context, so at country level, at regional level, and at continental level? Honorable, I'll start with you and then we'll go that way. Please keep your interventions short.
From the time we developed the National Social Protection Policy and made the family the first line of intervention, now the whole camera is on the family, so that we harness the traditional social protection systems. And this started from the COVID time, because families really took on the social protection, even when some of them were limping, but they tried to take it on. And from there, we are trying to encourage families to really engage their traditional systems. And also, of course, trying to make sure that the synergies between the players and the actors are to emphasize that it is everyone's business. And the policy on public works is also working well. So the poor people can engage in public works. And as members of parliament, we are trying to make sure that as they engage in public works, we have social protection infrastructure, like child centers, children centers, where they can put their children and work, and then pick them up and take them home. So for us as members of parliament, it assists us to claim and make sure these assurances are put in place and practically given to the people the way they are assured in the policies. For us, ours is to do the oversight, go to the communities and make sure that it is being done the way it is in the law.
So it is playing a significant role in rural development?
Yes.
You're finding it
so
responsive?
we go to the rural people to make sure that they get their services as they are assured in the laws.
Thank you. Ms. Amibola?
Thank you very much. So social protection as it relates to rural development. For us in West Africa, about 80% of the workforce is in the rural area. So this is a category of people that we cannot ignore. But the challenge over time has been whether or not these people are captured in national registries or in social registries. For me, this stresses the importance of data collection again, data-driven social protection. So there has to be a lot of emphasis on making sure that the right people are included in the database. We know, of course, that there will be inclusion as well as exclusion errors, but that notwithstanding, there must be specific targeted interventions aiming at collecting data from the rural communities. Now, for the ECOWAS Social Protection Framework, we clearly acknowledge the importance of social protection and rural development, and that is why specific objective 2 is specifically dedicated to increasing coverage and adequacy of social protection to the informal economy and vulnerable groups, including, there's a long list listed there. So coming out of this specific objective are some strategic actions which we expect all our member states to implement within the lifetime of the social protection framework. So I mean, that is what the social protection framework seeks to contribute to rural development. But let me add that within the ECOWAS Commission, we have a whole directorate that is dedicated to agriculture and rural development. And coming out of that directorate are so many interventions, too many to list. So we have clearly acknowledged the importance of that group of people, and in line with our Vision 2050, ECOWAS is making sure that nobody whatsoever is left behind.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alice?
Thank you so much. I will add to my sister Abby. I'll call her Abby. From the East African point of view, like I said, the social protection policy provides specifically for rural development. And one of the strategies to strengthen community-based approaches to social protection and provide access to financing initiatives so that people can be able to participate in the economy. It is also providing for transition from informal to formal economy, because we need to see these people graduating from assistance to where they can ably sustain themselves and their families. We are also promoting tailor-made initiatives to particular communities, because we have different cultures and approaches and the way we see things. Like it was mentioned, one of the issues is not being aware. Why? Sometimes based on the culture, sometimes based on other factors. So we are promoting tailor-made programs that support the communities in that context. And also we are doing advocacy, capacity building. You know, social protection, social access to social security is a right. It's nothing to bargain. It's a right, and everybody should know their rights. And governments need to provide intentionally financed social protection, because it is a right, it is a human right, and everybody should access it. Yeah.
Okay.
There are so many.
Thank
There are so
you.
many, but
Thank
at
you very
least
much.
I can highlight a few.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Priscilla.
Thank you very much. Just to add on to what my colleagues here have mentioned, the importance of having resources when we are looking at development. Hence, social protection comes in, and the different schemes, how they can support people to be able to have enough resources to influence their development. However, these people can only do that if they are healthy. The importance of having proper health institutions in Africa to make sure that people receive attention from health personnel as and when they require it. The importance of Africa to look at the issue of corruption. In a number of social protection schemes, the people that should not be benefiting from such schemes find themselves, their names in those lists, and the people that really deserve to be supported are then left out. I'll give you an example of one program in my country called BIM. It's an education program supposed to looking at vulnerable children, but you then find that business people's children, teachers, nurses, anybody who is in employment, their children are benefiting from that scheme. So we need to look at issues of corruption as Africa and be able to deal with that. The issue of social protection being a political animal and how it affects development, that one also is very key. We have to influence the mindsets of the politicians to be able to address social protection in the best way possible. The issues of water, sanitation and health are also very key. How much water is available? How clean is it? How available is it to everyone? The sanitation issues, disability and age-friendly facilities, do we have those so that people are then able to live a healthy life? There is quite a lot that we can talk about in terms of people being able and prepared and ready to take up development in their different environments. The climate change issues that we're talking about, how much does it affect development in our countries? People find themselves spending more time cutting down trees and selling firewood rather than farming and bringing up crops and so on, and people destroying the environment in the process of being farmers. So we have so many things that really can affect development or bring it down as Africa that we have to address.
Okay, thank you very much. So that the rest of you are not forgotten about, I'll allow, is that a hand up? A hand up. I didn't even finish saying that I'm going to allow a round of questions. Okay. All right. So we also have participants that are attending virtually. So if we've got participants online that would also like to ask questions, there's a team that's coordinating that. So please do raise your hand and then you'll be acknowledged. So let's go ahead. We have a hand up already. Do we have any other question in the room? Okay, so we'll take those two hands over there to our panelists.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make a contribution and also make homage, testimony to one guy that we call, sorry?
Just come closer to the mic.
I say that I want to make a contribution. So allow me to make a testimony to one guy that we call Omar Diop, who worked for a long time in AU, and we built a program that we call Social Protection Plan for Informal Economy and Rural Workers, SPIRE work. And for many years, we try, make efforts to implement this program in Africa, but we didn't succeed. Finally, we tried to move to ECOWAC space, and we have a concept note of the ECOWAS planning and capacity building workshop on the AU Social Protection Plan for the informal economy and rural workers. We try to adapt this document to ECOWAS people. Please, maybe I will share these documents with all of you, and then you can see that we are not reinvent the wheel. All of the things that we are talking about for rural workers, informal economy people, for social protection, African experts already think about that. Maybe we need to take it and also revive it, please. That is just my additional contribution for ECOWAS.
Very, very useful contribution. Thank you very much. And like you say, I think it would be helpful if you could share the document with participants in here. Yes, Florence?
Yes, thank you very much. I have two questions. The first one is to the Honorable Member of Parliament, who is talking about the social protection group that you have. There's also the equal opportunities group. Where are the synergies, and how do we get the two to work together? Because I know that in the budgeting system of Uganda, you have to have the equal opportunity clearly articulated. Now, if we also have the social protection, how do we synergize for that too, so that we address a common good for the human race, as it were? Then the second question I have is, we keep on saying governments have not budgeted, have not done this and the other. I'm just wondering, maybe we are over, quote unquote, spoon feeding on this social protection thing, so that people then really get their responsibility of, really get the idea of taking responsibility for their protection and development, because they know that government is going to do something. How can we harness our traditional indigenous knowledge for social protection, which has always existed? I mean, build on that to see that social protection can be promoted holistically and sustainably without relying on donors. Thank you so much.
me take a position paper to the Committee on Finance, the Committee on Budget, and we understand that social protection actually is a right. And when you go to Ministry of Finance, they will tell you that this is just a recurrent expenditure. They don't think it is an investment. And that is why yesterday you heard from the Minister of Gender that we are pressurizing them and compelling them to come up with a business case so that we go to Ministry of Finance and present a business case that when you invest in the people, then you will have a productive citizenry, then you will have a resilient citizenship that whenever they get shocks, they can get themselves out of the shocks. And to remind them that development is not about objects, it's about the people. And so we want the business case on social protection expedited so that government now can understand that every coin of money you invest in people has a very high return on investment, a higher return than what we even put on roads, than what we even put on electricity. The money we put in people will have very high returns. But the business case needs to come out so that we present it to the technical working group and the office of the Prime Minister, and then all the sector heads will be compelled to take this as an investment and not as a recurrent expenditure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Fatu or anyone, do we have any online participants that would like to make an intervention? No. Okay, so we don't have anyone online. Maybe like the final remarks now, so we can close the session.
Thank you.
Gary.
Maybe just a few words on the traditional knowledge and practices. Mentioned that why don't we look at the traditional African ways of looking after each other as a social protection measure? There are so many reasons that makes this practice a problem at the moment. As you realize that a majority of Africans are migrating within Africa, they are migrating to Europe, to America, and everywhere else. And so the social fabric has like dismantled. The extended family that would be around you in a village, some of them have gone to cities, out of the country, out of the continent. And so it becomes a huge challenge for us to expect the traditional ways to function as they used to. However, in some instances, they still work, and those ideas can be borrowed to come up with new ways of looking after each other. The one example, in my country, they used to call it the Zundera Mambo, where the chief, after every harvest, everyone would give a bucket or a bag of grain to the chief to keep for the dry season, for the vulnerable groups. And those ideas can be borrowed now and be used as social protection measures in the future. But however, there is a lot that we can also learn from our cultural practices, from our religious practices, that will go a long way in terms of assisting vulnerable groups.
Okay,
And,
so harnessing those lessons from traditional ways of providing protection for our communities.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'll have to move on to Alice. Yeah. I'll ask for a minute each because we've already gone well past the 35 minutes that we asked for. Alice, Amibola, and then we'll come to Honorable Flavia.
Thank you, Moderator. Just to add on what Honorable just said, echoing from what our sister questioned as spoon feeding or leading to dependence syndrome. Social protection is a right, and we must acknowledge that there are some people who will be supported until they die. Could be a very small portion, but because we are also encouraging transition and graduation from informal to formal economy, we will see a big number of people graduating from assistance. However, it could be 0.01, but there will be somebody in a community who will be supported until the end of their life because of different level of vulnerabilities. So it is not spoon feeding, it would be spoon feeding if there are no measures and strategies to encourage graduation.
Thank you very much.
To highlight that.
Very useful. Bola, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Yes, just picking up from where the last speaker left off. I see social protection as being more than a human right. I think it's a right that gives access to other human rights. So we should even see it in that light. It is a right that allows human beings enjoy their other fundamental human rights. It gives access. Then I want to stress for us the importance of monitoring, evaluation, and governance. This is so critical. We need to have indicators that are smart, that we can use to measure and track progress towards the goal that we have set for ourselves to achieve. The lifespan or the implementation period of the ECOWAS Social Protection Framework is 2022 to 2030, if I'm right. So I look forward to having reports on the level of implementation of the ECOWAS Social Protection Framework using the clear indicators that we have earmarked for so doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly?
Much, and two things. One is that not all of us are poor, but all of us are vulnerable. So we shall at any point need this social protection. If everyone perceives it like that, we would be more passionate than we are now. Number two, being that social protection takes a life cycle approach, for us as the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, we are overseeing the scale-up of birth registrations. Because if 12% of the children of Uganda who are in 8, 9, 10 millions are not, only 12% are registered, then we fail on the life cycle approach because we should start from birth up to death. And so we are emphasizing and overseeing the scale-up of the birth registration. We are glad that NIRA has taken on a birth registration where they even give NIN numbers at birth, so that by the time someone requires a national ID, at least they have a NIN number. So if that works very well, it will work for us. And then lastly, populating and operationalizing the single registry. We need that data. It has been overemphasized because without data, social protection governance will be a problem.
Sure.
I thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much. That's been a rich discussion. Important issues raised there that will link social protection to rural development strategies very well, especially what you just ended with in terms of registries and data, in order for us to be able to be inclusive in reaching the rural areas. So issues of community-based approaches, community responses have come out significantly, the importance of advocacy, the national legal frameworks and anchoring social protection within the national legal frameworks, leaving no one behind, considering the rights perspective, not only as a right in and of itself, but also as a right that enables access to other fundamental rights. Strategic, technical, and programmatic leadership, consensus building, capacity building, linkages across sectors, development that is responsive to individual rural contexts, cost of inaction. I think that's very fundamental, not just looking at what it costs to deliver social protection, but what it also costs not to deliver social protection, making that investment case and ensuring that the development responds to needs of individuals at rural level. So thank you very much, well done. We've taken a full hour. I'll invite Dr. Lamy back to just walk us through what's next. We break for tea, I think, and then we'll carry on from there. Thank you very much. Another hand for the panel, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the patient really, really, no more speeches. Let's break for tea. Shall we reconvene at 11:30? So we can, strategize on how we move forward. But I think this was really, really relevant. Thank you so much. Let's break for tea.